The P-40 has many faults, but it is a rugged, heavy-hitting airplane that will bring its pilot home if he uses his head. This quiet observation by an 81st Fighter Group veteran defined the thin line between survival and catastrophe in the CBI theater. It is 9:27 a.m. on December 13th, 1943. Over the dense emerald canopy of Assam, India, the air is thick with a humid morning haze that clings to the wings of a lone Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. Second Lieutenant Philip Adair feels the steady, rhythmic vibration of the Allison V1710 engine through his flight boots as he pulls into a climbing turn. Suddenly, the horizon shatters. To the east, 64 Japanese aircraft materialize through the mist like a dark, coordinated swarm. 24 Mitsubishi Ki-21 Sally bombers, escorted by 40 Nakajima Ki-43 Oscars, move with lethal intent toward Denjon airfield. Below, the base lies exposed, a vital artery of the hump airlift. Adair is the only pilot in the sky, a single 23-year-old soul standing against an entire Sentai. The odds are not merely stacked, they are astronomical. To understand the weight of this lone Warhawk's climb, one must grasp the desperate geography of the China-Burma-India theater in late 1943. By this stage of the war, the Japanese Empire had severed the Burma Road, the primary overland artery for Allied supplies. The only remaining lifeline for Chiang Kai-shek's beleaguered forces in China was the hump, a treacherous aerial corridor over the towering, jagged peaks of the eastern Himalayas. Denjon airfield was a critical node in this logistical chain, a clearing in the Assam jungle where C-47 transport aircraft sat like fat, vulnerable targets. In the 8 weeks preceding this morning, Japanese raids had been surgical and devastating, claiming 47 transport planes and over 100 lives on the ground. These were not mere skirmishes. They were attempts to strangulate the entire Allied resistance in Asia by bleeding the airlift dry. Intelligence reports from Burma indicated that when Japanese formations reached their targets unopposed, they achieved a terrifying 90% hit rate. On this day, Denjon housed enough fuel to sustain hump operations for 11 days and a field hospital filled with 63 wounded men. If the 24 Mitsubishi Ki-21 bombers reached their release point, the resulting inferno would not just destroy aircraft, it would halt the flow of history across the mountains. Adair's fuel gauge showed 180 gallons, 90 minutes of combat power, and a choice that would define the Burma Banshee's legacy forever. The Japanese aviators of the 5th Air Division approached Denjon with the practiced stoicism of a force accustomed to aerial dominance over the Indian frontier. For the bomber crews in their sallies, the mission was viewed as a mechanical inevitability, a mathematical exercise in deconstruction. They expected the sky to remain empty until they reached the target's inner perimeter, envisioning a predictable run where the only resistance would be the sporadic, inaccurate thumping of light anti-aircraft fire from the jungle floor. Their escorts, the Nakajima Ki-43 Oscars, circled in layered tiers like predatory hawks, confident in their legendary agility and the butterfly combat flaps that allowed them to turn inside any Allied airframe. To them, the P-40 was a clumsy, heavy relic of a previous era, a flying brick that could be easily dissected by the superior maneuverability of the Japanese Ha-115 engines. In stark contrast, Adair's cockpit was a vacuum of isolation and adrenaline. While the Japanese felt the collective strength of a 64-plane phalanx, Adair felt the crushing weight of singular responsibility. He was not merely a pilot. He was the last barrier for the wounded in the field hospital below. The Japanese expected a routing. Adair offered a collision. Where they saw an obsolete opponent, they actually encountered a desperate, high-speed predator that refused to play by the established rules of engagement. This was the intersection of imperial confidence and individual defiance, a moment where the Japanese expectation of a sterile victory vanished into the smoke of a burning lead bomber. The cold empirical data of the engagement reflects a desperate geometry. Adair's P-40 Warhawk, serial number 44, was not designed for a 64-to-1 dogfight, yet it carried the precise mechanical lethality of 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns. With only 12 seconds of sustained trigger time, the margin for error was non-existent. Intelligence records from the 89th Fighter Squadron confirmed the enemy's composition. 24 Mitsubishi Ki-21 Sally bombers heavy with 2,250 pounds of ordnance each, screened by 40 nimble Nakajima Ki-43 Oscars. The Ki-21, while robust, lacking self-sealing fuel tanks and adequate armor, which Adair identified instantly. As he rolled his Warhawk into an inverted dive, the Allison V1710-81 engine hit a manifold pressure of 54 inches, accelerating the American fighter to a critical velocity of 320 miles per hour. The engagement was in the physical destruction of the lead bomber. At 800 yards, the concentrated fire of the Browning guns shattered the Ki-21's port wing. When the tight V formation collapsed into chaos, it proved a key lesson of air combat. Even a single persistent attacker could disrupt a much larger force by throwing off their bombing timing. Adair's flight logs proved that the bomber stream lost its cohesion, scattering 15 miles short of Denjon Airfield. Every bomb load remained in the bays of the Sallies, forced back toward Burma by the kinetic persistence of a single damaged American fighter. The psychological landscape of the 5th Air Division shifted from calculated arrogance to cautious retreat as the engagement unfolded. The Japanese command had long relied on the Oscar's turn rate superiority and the weight of numbers to crush Allied morale. However, Adair's unconventional tactics shattered the enemy's operational certainty. By repeatedly diving into the bomber stream, Adair rendered the Oscar escorts reactive rather than proactive. The transformation was immediate. The Japanese pilots began to view the lone P-40 not as a target but as an unpredictable, dangerous variable. When Adair sustained critical damage and a burning engine, he did not surrender. Instead, he employed the inverted climb technique. Watching an American fighter fly upside down to regain altitude forced the Japanese escort leaders to reconsider the threat. They were no longer fighting a machine, they were fighting a pilot who had abandoned the standard dogma of survival. The transformation was total. What began as a routine destruction of a supply base became a chaotic scramble for the Japanese to salvage their formation. By the time they veered toward Burma, their mission had been completely subverted, proving that the rigid reliance on formation superiority could be dismantled by a single, desperate, and highly skilled individual. The primary symbol of American resilience that day was not the P-40 itself, but its landing gear. specifically the manual hand pump mechanism required to lower it. In an age of automated hydraulics, a simple steel pump handle located on the left side of the cockpit represented the raw manual labor that fueled the democracy of the 1940s. It was a physical tether to the manufacturing capacity of the United States, a mechanism that demanded sweat and grit to operate when the automated systems failed under the stress of battle. When Adair was forced to lash his control stick with a lap belt just to free his hands for those 28 agonizing rhythmic pumps, the machine ceased to be a weapon and became a testament to American tenacity. The gear was an object of survival, a symbol of a nation that believed in the capability to fix, adapt, and overcome even when the systems, the hydraulics, the electrical bundles, and the engine had been compromised by enemy fire. It served as a stark, tangible reminder that the Allied victory in the CBY theater was built upon the ability of the individual to manually overcome the mechanical failures of a global machine, pumping life back into an aircraft that had already been written off as a smoking casualty of the jungle. The story of Philip Adair and the defense of Denjon Airfield is more than a mere record of aerial combat. It is an enduring reflection on the nature of courage in the face of inevitable failure. When Adair rolled his battered Warhawk inverted for the final time to stretch a glide that should have ended in the jungle floor, he defied the cold mathematics of aviation physics. He proved that freedom is not merely an ideological concept but a physical state, one that requires the individual to impose their will upon the machinery of oppression, even when the oil pressure has dropped to zero and the engine has surrendered to heat. In the silence that followed the engine's final gasp, there existed a larger haunting truth about the cost of persistence. Nations may build empires and armies may amass fleets, but wars are ultimately decided by the refusal of the lone pilot to accept the fate assigned to him by the enemy. Adair's survival, and the salvation of the hump supplies, stands as a testament to the fact that when an individual chooses duty over personal safety, the impossible becomes merely another obstacle to overcome. His legacy remains a beacon of the indomitable human spirit, reminding us that no matter how overwhelming the odds, the capacity of one person to act with total conviction can rewrite the trajectory of history itself.